The story begins in a forest where there is a house. Inside, there is a single woman named Maddie Young. Maddie is a book writer who is deaf and mute since the age of 13. There, she is seen cooking while looking at a cooking guide. Then a message pops up on her laptop from her neighbor named Sarah, who wants to stop by her house. Maddie welcomes her. After Maddie replies to Sarah's message, she feeds her cat named Bitch. Soon after, Sarah appears. Upon arrival, Sarah immediately pockets her phone because her purpose for coming to Maddie's house is to return Maddie's book she had borrowed. They start communicating with sign language because Maddie cannot hear or speak. Suddenly, the house's fire alarm goes off. It turns out Maddie forgot to take her cooking out of the oven. After that incident, they chat again on the front porch. Soon, Sarah says goodbye to go home. After Sarah leaves, Maddie receives a message from her fan named Craig, but she deletes the message, indicating that her love is unrequited. Night falls, and Maddie is seen writing an article on her laptop, still confused about how to continue. She calls her fan, Craig, who is hesitant, then hangs up. Suddenly, Craig calls back, surprising Maddie. She does not answer. Instead, she ignores it. Maddie gets up to clean the cooking utensils she used earlier that day. Then, suddenly Sarah appears out of nowhere, screaming and asking for help from Maddie, who is focused on cleaning her cooking equipment. Maddie does not realize Sarah's presence. Then a man we'll call the Man appears wearing a mask and kills Sarah by stabbing her multiple times. After Sarah dies, the man sees Maddie, who is still busy by herself. The man tries to knock on her door, but Maddie does not respond. After finishing her work, Craig calls Maddie again, but once again Maddie does not answer. She continues writing her novel. While Maddie is typing, it turns out the man is already behind her. Then, suddenly her friend Maddie named Max video calls her, causing the man to choose to step aside. Max asks about her novel. When the man takes Maddie's phone, Max sees and hears something behind Maddie. Maddie, unaware of the man behind her, assumes it is her cat, Bitch. Finally, they end the video call. Maddie takes her cat's food and searches for her cat in every corner of the house, but to no avail. She cannot find her cat. She returns to continue typing her novel and suddenly receives a message from her own number. When opened, it is a photo of herself typing and doing other activities, which confuses Maddie. Eventually, she realizes that someone is in her house. She looks towards her house's door, which is already open, and approaches it. A masked man appears holding his phone, and Maddie sees him. The masked man tries to enter through the windows and other doors, but Maddie follows to lock them. Maddie tries to contact the police through her laptop, but the masked man knows and immediately turns off the electricity to the house, causing not only the lights to go out, but also the internet connection. The masked man then deflated Maddie's car tire. Maddie writes something on her glass door that roughly means, "Take off your mask." The masked man then took off his mask and said that he could come into her house any time, but he didn't want to until Maddie wished her dead. Maddie hides in her room with the door jammed by a dresser. She sees a shadow from her bedroom window, and when she looks, it turns out to be her friend, Sarah, who has died. Behind Sarah's body, the masked man reappears. Maddie is very sad about her friend's death and takes her car keys, planning to sound the car alarm. She successfully sounds the car alarm and manages to attract the attention of the masked man. The masked man breaks the car window to turn off the car alarm. Maddie remembers Sarah's phone in her pants pocket and immediately approaches Sarah's body to look for the phone, but she doesn't find it. The masked man appears and immediately chases her. Maddie takes a hammer and hits the masked man's hand, successfully locking her window again. The masked man tears Sarah's shirt to bandage his wound and takes Sarah's necklace. Maddie witnesses this and goes back into her house. Once inside, she sees the masked man circling her house. Maddie sneaks out of her house and hides under the front porch. When the masked man moves away, Maddie runs, but the masked man shoots an arrow at Maddie, almost hitting her. Maddie, panicked, instead of running, goes back into her house. The masked man leaves and Maddie goes to the upper floor of her house. From the upstairs window, Maddie sees the masked man still lurking around her house. When the masked man goes to another area, Maddie exits through the upstairs window and walks on the roof of her house. She throws her flashlight towards the garden, hoping it will attract his attention. The masked man approaches the flashlight and Maddie continues her escape. When she is about to come down, the masked man successfully shoots her in the leg. Maddie avoids another arrow. The masked man approaches Maddie, who is in pain. When the masked man is about to climb up, Maddie successfully hits him, causing him to fall and successfully takes his arrow. Maddie runs back into her house again. Maddie, wounded, treats her wound by pouring alcohol on it. After treating her wound, she takes the masked man's arrow and sees scratches indicating the number of victims the masked man has killed. Maddie tries to string the arrow, but she struggles to pull the bowstring, watched by the masked man. As Maddie continued to struggle with the bowstring, suddenly John, Sarah's boyfriend, arrived, knocking on the door and calling out for her. John saw the writing on Maddie's glass door and was startled by someone shining a flashlight at him and ordering him to raise his hands. It turned out to be the masked man pretending to be a police officer, interrogating John and asking for his identity. John handed over his wallet to the masked man. John explained his reason for being there. He was looking for his girlfriend, Sarah, who hadn't come home. The masked man asked for the girlfriend's name, and John answered. Then the masked man borrowed John's phone, supposedly to call for help. John gave his phone to the masked man, who pretended to make a call. After the call, the masked man secretly pocketed John's phone. John, noticing the masked man's injured hand, questioned him about it, and the masked man replied that someone with physical features like John had just hit him. John grew more suspicious of the masked man and asked for his phone back. When the masked man took out the phone, John inadvertently saw the masked man drop Sarah's necklace, which John witnessed. John pretended not to notice, and then asked how he could have come here. The masked man replied that he had been called by the house's owner, Maddie. John trapped the masked man with a question. How could someone who couldn't speak make a phone call? The masked man was immediately confused by this, but he didn't run out of ideas. He dodged the question by saying, "Maybe your girlfriend called." After discussing this, John informed the masked man that Maddie usually kept her house keys in a flower pot there. When the masked man searched for the house keys, John picked up a stone he planned to use to attack the masked man. John diverted the masked man's attention to a pot, and just as he was about to attack the masked man, Maddie appeared, banging on the door. John was preempted by the masked man, who stabbed him in the neck, causing his blood to flow profusely. Eventually, John was dying and suddenly woke up to attack the masked man in the midst of his agony. Maddie ran out of the house, and the masked man managed to hit her head. It turned out to be just Maddie's imagination. Maddie decided not to leave her house. John eventually passed away. Maddie predicted every action she would take, but it all ended tragically, and she was cornered by the choice: to go out and die, to keep waiting inside until she bled out and died. In short, she couldn't run, hide, or wait because it would all end tragically. Then Maddie decided to kill the masked man. Switch to the masked man, who took a car wheel key. As he was about to break down the door, he saw her cat, Bitch, and just as he was about to kill the cat, Maddie manages to shoot the masked man in the shoulder. After that, she ran back into her house. As she was about to enter, her arrow fell, and as she tried to pick it up, the masked man pinned her hand and stepped on it until it was crumpled. Despite her severe injuries, manages to write a message in her own blood on the glass: "Do it." The masked man, taking the iron, smashes the glass door. Meanwhile, Maddie writes a farewell note to her parents, describing the killer's features. She then retreats to the bathroom, feeling the life drain out of her due to blood loss, experiencing dizziness. Holding a knife, she waits for the masked man, who suddenly appears at the rear window. The masked man taunts Maddie, brandishing his knife, and makes a fatal mistake by laughing, which allows Maddie to sense his presence. Maddie managed to stab the masked man in the leg. With the last of her strength, she runs towards the kitchen and Maddie faints. And the scene shifts to the masked man, who sees Maddie's seemingly lifeless body. In a twist, Maddie sprays a chemical into his eyes, grabs the fire alarm, and directs it at the masked man, disorienting him with the loud noise. They fight, and as the masked man chokes Maddie, she reaches for a bottle opener but fails to grab it. As she nears death, she finally grasps the bottle opener and uses it to create 2 holes in the masked man's neck, preventing him from screaming. The more he tries to scream, the more blood flows from his neck. Maddie takes her phone from the masked man's pocket and calls 911, and the movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.